Hello, I'm Paul DeResta, and I'm delighted to be given the unexpected opportunity to present this podcast. Oh, my time's up.
Hello, welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed. My name's Gareth, and I admit I am an addict of Formula One, which makes this period of F1 on holiday a little difficult. He's Zog.
Hello.
Do you suffer the same problem?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can share. And Richard Porter, welcome to our self-help group. How are you feeling?
Bit clammy, shaky, can't sleep.
Yeah, okay.
That's mainly the heroin.
So here we are in the middle now of a Formula One season, and what a season it's turning out to be. There's a bit of a revival on certain circuits for Ferrari. We're seeing Vettel getting his elbows out. We're seeing not much from Honda.
Well, you say that, but they're showing signs of adequacy. I mean,
yes.
Come on.
And they'll be happy with that, Richard, won't they? They'll be happy with adequacy.
Well, what a world where McLaren Honda aspires to being adequate.
Yeah.
They got into the top 10, didn't they? In Hungary, in qualifying, they got into the top 10.
Yeah, and they got both cars in the points, did they
Well
not?
done them. I don't know. I'm still intrigued by these rumours that were flying around, seem to have gone a bit quiet again, that they would actually bin Honda mid-season. Mm-hmm. I can't see it happening somehow unless, as we speak, in the summer recess, there's going to be some kind of incredible step change, and there's a Mercedes-branded lorry backing up to the factory in Woking as we speak. I just can't see it happening. I'm sure there's too much paperwork.
It'd be quite a sleight of hand. I mean, it would be a bit like the scene in episode 2 of Games of Thrones that I've just realised that I can't actually mention because you, Richard, haven't seen it yet, and we don't want to spoil your enjoyment of that particular show.
Sleight
You
of
could
hand.
save me some time, because as we were saying before we started recording, I'm starting to think Game of Thrones isn't as good as we all think it is.
Stop it.
But every so often I just think I could just simplify my life by not watching it.
Yeah, you could.
And I don't know that I would miss it. I think I could live without it.
Who
That's the
wants
thing.
a simple life, as Ron Dennis probably said once?
But to get back to the McLaren Honda thing, it would be a hell of a sleight of hand if they managed to pull an engine supply out of the bag mid-season.
The latest thinking is that they are discussing with Renault, apparently Renault plant next year, which would be amazing if that happens. We'll come to all that other stuff in a moment, but I actually want to talk about a unique event which happened at Hungary I don't ever remember seeing with such dignity before. The way that Mercedes re-allowed Bottas to take the lead from Hamilton in the closing laps of the race. That is uncommonly generous.
It was. He did the right things. I was delighted to see that. I thought
I applaud it.
It's not just about winning. It's about the manner in which you win. It's about the way you win. You know.
Yeah.
And when we come to the end of the season, whether Hamilton wins the title or not, he's done it in the right way.
It was good.
He
good
will
racing
regret.
karma. It spoke well of him that he can be quite petulant. He's certainly a racer in the way that all of the best F1 drivers and champions are, where it's sort of do or die and they don't give in, and you see it in Vettel and Alonso, just as you saw it in
Willing to do anything.
Senna's the obvious example. You know, and sometimes that manifests itself in ruthlessness.
Oh, what, a bit like Cersei in Game of Thrones, perhaps?
Stop mentioning Game of Thrones, please. And I think it was a really noble and dignified thing to do. He didn't have to do it, particularly because Bottas was so far back. And I don't know what else was said or not said, but it just felt like a deal's a deal, and he was a gentleman about it.
He held up his end of the bargain, and we admire him all the more for it.
It was such a thing to give up, because he was giving up a spot on the podium. And psychologically, that's important, isn't it, I think? It's then going, oh no, I'll take the third of the losers.
It is important, but I say third of the losers. If you're not on the top step of the podium, if you haven't won the race, you're one of the losers. And so I think to some extent he would be more concerned about the points, the point tally, rather than making it onto the podium again.
Is he playing the grown-up long game? There could be a universal resetting of this. You know, I think
he's a man of his word.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. He said he'd give the place back, presumably, and he did.
Imagine when we get to the last race of the year, which is Abu Dhabi again this year, and Vettel has a sufficient point advantage over Lewis. And once again, Bottas is in front of Hamilton, and on the last lap, Bottas will be obliged to allow Hamilton through to get enough points to beat Vettel. We were talking about consequences earlier on. This is like Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones, where an event happens
Okay,
and there's a payback later on in the series.
The Game of Thrones count. That's it. That's.
But yeah, I think it's uncommonly dignified and gentlemanly and beautiful to see. I'm so chuffed about that. It's reinstated my belief in Lewis, I think. I like him more for that.
Also, there's a very big... I'm just going to say it. I was trying to avoid saying it, but there's a big take-home from this. I'm sorry. It's irritating.
What, going forward?
Going forward, circle back to the take-home from this is
the chief
something
message.
that's not been... yes. Mention Game of Thrones again as well. And it's that Hamilton likes Bottas.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
he
He's prepared to work with him as a team.
It says something about the dynamics of the...
Because I don't think he'd have done such favours for Rosberg last season. It just wouldn't have happened.
Okay,
Too much going on.
Hamilton likes Bottas, we like Bottas, everyone likes Bottas. Some of us don't like Vettel as much as we used to since he tried bumping Lewis. Do you think he got away with murder? Because we haven't talked about this on the programme. Do you think when Vettel thumped into Lewis thinking that he brake tested him, do you think he should have been banned for a race?
What was the penalty he got? Was it 10 seconds?
Yeah, and then he's had his
10
licence endorsed as well, hasn't he? So he's now...
And then he apologised.
In such a position, if he does something like that again, he is in peril of having his licence suspended. But also then he's basically been given the equivalent of community service, hasn't he? Which is fine. It was a complete dick move, that's the thing.
A total dick move. It was deliberate, it was dangerous, it was
Using your
absolutely
car
not
as
the
a
kind of thing
weapon.
you want to in any way suggest is okay. Then again, they were behind the safety car, they weren't at racing speed.
Yes. Did Schumacher get penalised for that time when he almost ran Barrichello into the pit wall? I can't remember, because, that's a dick move at racing speeds. To me, that's much worse. This was a dick move at a much slower pace, and that does make a difference, but also the stewards decided what they decided. Maybe they could have been a little harsher, but they made their ruling. I think I found it more annoying the way that everybody was getting rather puffed up and pompous about it, and insisting more should be done. Also, you can't ignore the fact that in the back of their minds, I would imagine they're thinking, well, if we exclude this guy, it rather spoils the overall spectacle of the sport that we've got going on here, where, thank God, we've got some kind of battle going on, which in many seasons has been lacking. So you don't want to take him out of the equation too much. It was a heat-of-the-moment thing, and I think he is prone to those, isn't he? He's just terribly prone to moments of stamping petulance.
Yeah, but you shouldn't go easy on a driver because he's one of the guys who's leading the championship, or he's one of the guys who's making it a good championship. If you're giving somebody a penalty for a dick move or reckless driving, whatever it is, that should be done without favour. You should have an even-handed application of your penalties.
Yes, but I do think it was probably playing on the minds
of the people who are commenting.
Crossroads.
Yes.
They go, right, how harsh should we be? Even subconsciously, they must have been thinking, let's not.
Given
you're going to err on the side of caution in the race.
Yeah,
to be sure. Yeah.
Given your belief, Richard, then they've done the right thing in order to protect the entertainment. They've sort of put him on a warning. He knows that he's now on shaky ground, and that actually enhances the sense of jeopardy for the sport as well. It's another part of the story arc, another level of the dynamic. A bit like in Game of Thrones, where you've got characters...
I'm glad you've mentioned that.
No, I'm serious. It's part of the backstory. We love Formula 1 because of the backstory, because these little moments that we catalogue, we remember, and we create a profile of each driver, and that's what we watch when we watch the race. We want them to do well or don't do well because of their behaviour as much as how good a driver they are. It's a soap opera, isn't it? We love it. Now, while we're talking about Vettel tried to drive a Ferrari with a shield, a wind shield, as the Americans might say, on it. Did you see it? Did you see what it looked like?
Yeah, I thought it looked quite good.
Yeah.
But
it looks better than the Halo, I think.
Unfortunately, did you read about one of the unexpected aero results from that, which is that it somehow forces the air over the driver's helmet, but then down the back of it, so their head is being pushed forward. So I found it was a bit weird, like they wouldn't have modelled that, or indeed just stuck it in a wind tunnel and figured that out. But apparently that was one of the issues. And also he said it made him dizzy, which I found strange. I mean, it's hard to say unless you're actually sitting in that car. I imagine there was some kind of weird distortion to it. But fundamentally, he was just looking through a clear piece of plastic.
But this is why you do that kind of testing, obviously, to iron out those wrinkles.
He only managed one lap, didn't he? One lap. He said the distortion was so severe it was making him woozy. I mean, you've driven a Saab 99, you know what a bendy blue glass can look like.
A modern Mini, they have very upright screens and things.
But unless you've got totally non-reflective surfaces, you're always going to get points in the lap, and particularly on a bright day, you're going to get
or under
reflections.
lights in some of the tracks at Singapore,
or in the rain.
There's a lot of eventualities, I suppose, they've got to figure out. I would guess they'll stick some Rain-X on it if they were going to use it for the rainy ones. The drops would just be blown off, but it'd be no worse than having the rain over your visor, which isn't really an issue, is it?
They'd probably have tear-offs, really great big tear-offs on it, I would imagine.
There's some kind of hand crank system to peel the tear off.
Well, you've got
a little man, like a dwarf, Tyrion Lannister.
Don't say it!
They've got tear-offs on windscreens at Le Mans, on endurance racing cars, so you'd have them on a smaller...
And they make bendy screens work, don't they, at Le Mans? We manage that.
It's true, But anyway, it's all the material, isn't it? Because they're not doing the aero screen.
But they're a closed cockpit, and in a closed cockpit you're going to get fewer reflections from, if you like, behind the screen, whereas if you're in an open cockpit, I think
that's a fair point. They're going to go with the flip-flop, aren't they?
Well, actually, on that point, you're right. What about the canopies on fighter jets? They're very complex pieces of glass.
Just flat at the front, aren't they? Oh, no, they aren't. The modern ones are quite curvy.
Think about F-16. An A10 has flat glass at the front.
Does.
But if you think about an F-16 and F-18, they've got big bulbous...
compound curves.
This is probably a conversation for another day, but I do enjoy an A10. I think everyone does, don't they? But here's the thing, we'll save this for another show, but what is the car equivalent of an A10 Warthog?
I don't know, a Land Rover with a 20mm cannon attached to it. I don't know.
A Gelendenwagen.
Yeah, it probably is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, they've sort of been progressively modernised, but you can't overcome the fundamental old-fashionedness of the hull. And yet, they're sort of incredibly sturdy.
Nice.
Anyway, we'll come back to this one.
So we've got the halo. Simon Templar, Roger Moore.
I just think of Beyoncé and that song, which I won't sing for copyright reasons, but every time someone says the halo, I just hear Beyoncé belting out that word.
It's not beautiful, is it?
It's going to happen.
I think she's quite attractive. But Jay-Z thinks so. The halo, right, yeah.
And it is going to happen. There's no two ways about it. And I believe all the teams bar one objected. I love the way Niki Lauda...
Who didn't object?
It's a good question.
It's very hard to look at a development that's going to make it safer for the drivers, to make it less likely for a driver to be horribly injured or killed in certain eventualities, and say, no, let's not do that.
That's the tricky bit, isn't it? Yeah, because you're going, well, now we know it exists. If something happened and it wasn't being used,
it's be sued for not being safe.
We're deeply into the Radio 4 moral maze territory here.
Well, you're getting into this moral territory. This touches on the thing of how dangerous do you want the sport to be? Because I don't think you can get away with the fact that the element of danger is part of the appeal. One of the reasons why we admire the drivers, we admire their skill, is that they're doing their thing in circumstances that could get them killed, and we envy their ability to keep their cool and to do that well consistently lap after lap whilst they're risking their lives or risking serious injury. If you remove that danger entirely, it may still be just as hard to get round that corner at that speed, but we're still not going to admire them quite as much, are we?
Try this on for size. The more casual F1 fan actually likes to see the odd accident.
Oh, they live crushes.
But they want to see the driver then get out and go, okay.
Right, sure.
So I suppose, in a way, you want the drivers to feel as safe as they possibly can be, because then they'll be more inclined to take risks. I mean, I think that's to misunderstand the mentality of F1 drivers, which is...
What we want is a completely safe car, but if you crash, a really scary clown will jump out and go, whoa! And, so they'll be totally freaked out. And they'll be... Is that what... It's
not where I was going with it, but I like your idea all the same.
Thank you.
I think Motorsport has gone down the wrong avenue here. You have to acknowledge that the introduction of the halo is, in part, a reaction to Jules Bianchi's tragic death. Head protection is the focus, but the point we should perhaps focus on is that Jules Bianchi, his situation was severely aggravated, not by not having any frontal protection, but by the fact that the race has been run in a thunderstorm and that there was a tractor on circuit. Now, you can make the drivers safer by eliminating the tractors from the circuit with better management and training of that, and not running in dangerous conditions. You don't need to put airbags on your car Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, and you're right about that, but what about Felipe Massa's accident where he was hit by the spring? Now, that is exactly the kind of case where a halo would have prevented a nasty injury.
Possibly, yes. Same with Justin Wilson's accident. I think the belief is that a halo type thing would have prevented that. Jules Bianchi, no. The general consensus seems to be that was such a freak and unfortunate accident that the halo wouldn't have helped that. And it was, as you say, Gareth, because there was a digger on the track, effectively. Yeah. But the weather bit I don't agree with, because actually that goes back to what Zog was saying, that the appeal of seeing people skirting the fringes of danger, and part of it is seeing these people taking on adverse conditions as well. It's always the great definer of a truly great driver if they're quick in the wet. You know, and there's some drivers who are sort of underrated because they really shine when it's wet. You know, Button is always great in the wet. You know,
Barrichello,
really great. It shows the true greatness at his core. And it's always a great decider. I would hate to think they go, and they already do a little bit with there's too much standing water. You know, famously, there have been instances where they go, it's a bit too wet, we won't go out. And I always think, boo hiss, you're being paid loads, get out there. And so I'd hate to see that restricted for safety reasons. Can't remember the last sort of big smash in the wet. It's been a while, hasn't it? But you're right, I mean, better management. It was a crass mistake in Japan to have that digger thing anywhere where a car could hit it. But the weather, that's part of what we're hoping to see, is it sorts out the true greats.
Yes.
Watch them battle the conditions.
40 years ago, Tom Price died from a head injury in Kyalami. This is the 40th anniversary. And the reaction then was not to give the drivers a cockpit, but to train marshals in a way that made the sport potentially safe enough for big investment from multinationals, hence modern Formula One. There is a financial imperative to make the sport safer. And Richard, I think, absolutely correctly pointed out kind of legal duty of care, which has surfaced now. And I think, like it or not, that's inevitable, isn't it?
In motor racing, in aviation safety standards, over the years, you know, we've had a process of when accidents happen, you look at what led up to that accident happening, and if there's something that you can change to make things safer in future, you do that. And that's why commercial aviation is as safe as it is today. It's remarkably safe to travel in a flimsy aluminium tube. It's incredibly safe because of this constant process of learning from accidents, and you have to do the same in motorsport.
It's unbelievable, really, isn't it? I mean, this is probably another separate conversation. Planes remarkable. Pass over my house quite high up when they're stacking for
and they've never fallen out.
Never fallen out of the
sky.
On my house, but I do sometimes find myself, because my little boy is also obsessed with planes. So if we're in the garden on a nice day and the clear skies, and we're just looking at the planes, and I've got one of those little nerdy apps on my phone so I can see what the planes are and things. But I do sometimes have this moment where I go, there's 300 people sitting up there, thousands of feet up, and there's another 300 people, there's another 150 people, they're just all passing over. And we take this almost for granted now. And actually, it's a mind-boggling feat. I mean, it's so safe to fly, generally. I mean, when it goes wrong, it goes very wrong. But how few occasions does that come to pass?
Yeah, it's remarkable.
It depends if you're flying Aeroflot or not.
I see planes flying overhead, and every now and again, I'm an irritatingly science-based, rational, engineering-oriented person. But I do still look at an airliner going overhead and think, that thing just can't work. How can that thing fly? It's just too big and heavy.
The answer is,
how does that work?
The top half of the wing sucks.
Okay, that was Lana Del Rey with Ooh, I'm a Bit Sad. And coming up next is Beyoncé with the long-awaited follow-up to Halo. This is her new track, and it's called Some Kind of More Elegant Head Protection Device, given that we all agree such a safety measure is necessary.
Sniff Petrol with Gareth Jones on speed!
There is a Chinese curse, I believe, which is, may you live in interesting times. It's a terrible curse, isn't it? And I think we've probably been cursed at the moment, not just the political arena, but the huge movement in motorsport towards emerging car technologies is a beautiful and wonderful thing, but it's having consequences, I think, at the moment. The most obvious one, the most immediate one, is that Porsche have decided to remove themselves them competing in the WEC and therefore the Le Mans 24 Hour with a view to joining Formula E, or some say even Formula One, as an engine supplier in the next few years. But we'll see. It's great that Porsche are going with the whole Mission E statement. Electric cars, we love them. But let's discuss the small vacuole which is appearing in the centre of the Le Mans 24 Hours now that we only have Toyota as a factory hybrid entry, and they are going to compete in 2018. But with who?
Well, are they? I think, as we're recording this, they haven't confirmed their commitment to 2018, because I think they had said, yes, we're going to compete in 2018, but they said that in the expectation that they would be competing against Porsche next year in the WEC and at Le Mans. And now that Porsche are not going to be there, I think that does actually throw into question whether Toyota would even be there.
Well,
I think.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because on the one hand, unfinished business, they want to win it. Mm-hmm. But also, is it a hollow victory if they win it when there's no other LMP1 rival? And also, what if they're beset by the bad luck that's marked the past 2 years at Le Mans, and in fact they don't finish, and it's an open goal, and they still manage to somehow dink it over the crossbar?
That's the micro scale, that's the small scale thing. I mean, the big picture here is what the hell's going on? Just how bad is this crisis that we're looking at the moment? You know, how bad is it? And I think it's pretty bad.
Are you considering not going to Le Mans next year if there's no big LMP1 slug out at the front?
I did wonder the last week whether after this year's race, we sort of talked vaguely about plans for next year and who might be coming along. And, we were thinking it would be a pretty big trip next year. I'd been looking forward to that. But in the last week, I've been asking myself, if something doesn't happen for LMP1 and there's just Toyota and two privateers, maybe. Do I really want to go and watch that race? I don't know.
There is a suggestion that next year there will be at least 6 LMP1 non-hybrid cars running using chassis from this Dallara Russian partnership and Ginetta, of course, and this third one, Perrin with 2 N's, Perrin. It looks like never heard of Perrin before. It's an open source car. They claim already to have 2 cars running next year. So there could be a kind of interesting sub-LMP1 class with a bunch of cars run by teams like SMP, some great teams who've done well in LMP2. Manor are said to be running, I think, is it the Ginetta chassis next year? They're certainly looking at running an LMP1 chassis. And they're capable of doing that. We know what they're capable of in endurance racing now. They've had a good couple of years. So I'm reminded, and Richard, you said when we discussed old Le Mans on the Le Mans show, you enjoyed that peek back into sort of alternative reality. We could have a sort of alternative future reality here, where in the past we've had races won by cars outside of the top category. It would be interesting if non-hybrid LMP1s proved to be more entertaining than the Toyota car.
But it's only memorable and great if the car's in the lower category or something that you're not expecting to have a shot at the win when they win. It only means something if they've done that against strong competition. And when you've got 2 or 3 big manufacturers slogging it out at the front of the field. And 2 years ago, we had Audi, Porsche, Toyota, and Nissan and Rebellion and Collers.
Yeah, great.
But that was 2 years ago. And Peugeot were thinking of coming back in. And now all we've got is Toyota, probably.
I rather jokingly wrote to the ACO via Twitter the other day to say, "Dear ACO, could you invite Hyundai, Tesla and River Simple each to run a Garage 56 car in next year's race?"
Which would be great, but...
And they wrote back.
I saw.
The ACO said, "We'll think about it." That was good enough for me.
Well, they've got to fill out the field somehow. But I mean,
I'd go and watch that.
But also, there's this prospect of, I know there'll still be these LMP1 cars there, just not with the sort of big hitter factory teams.
There'll be the LMPL.
But then you've also got, I'm assuming the Ford GTs will still be there, and Aston will still be there. And Porsche will still be there because people will be running 911s as they always do, and then you get all these other people running Ferraris and things like that. It almost feels feels like, in a way, if all the LMP1 class cars wilt, then actually taking back to the sort of first principles of Le Mans, which is, in fact, you get these cars which are more recognisable as road cars, duking it out in their own battle. And so all is not lost. In fact, maybe this is a way in which the series will sort of reset itself.
I like your positive attitude, and you're absolutely right. The GT racing has been consistently fabulous the last few years. It's been great. And this year was fantastic.
Amazing.
It was a fantastic GT battle. Decided on the last lap. Yeah. And we were following that fight almost as closely as we were following the LMP1. I would be happy to go to Le Mans and watch another race like that, just watch the GT cars, for sure. But that's kind of getting away from the question of just how bad is this crisis in the prototype category. And it's... worry. I think it is the end of an era. I think we have seen the end of an era. Whatever comes out of the other side of this, who knows what it's going to be, but it's going to be a different looking kind of race series. It's going to be different.
Well, funny you should say that, because the most different, funny looking kind of race series at the moment is Formula E. And Porsche are talking about engaging with this championship at a pretty committed level, just like BMW and
Mercedes
they're holding off a year, aren't they? But they're going to come in. Formula E is starting to do damage, steal an audience, be an additional audience.
I don't think it's stealing an audience.
Yeah,
I think the viewing figures are very low. It is not hurting anybody's viewing figures. It's
cheap, isn't it?
But what are the viewing figures for the WEC? I don't think they're massive, are they? I think it's well attended in person by people, and Le Mans obviously is because it's huge, but actual people watching it on telly, I'm not sure it's that big. And
it's out there on one of the cable
exactly.
Channels,
how do you watch it?
But it's a minority thing. It's not
people sort of tag along almost, and I do this. You sort of tag along with what's happening in other events outside of Le Mans just by looking at social media. And the reason why Porsche are probably going to go into Formula E is the reason why any big manufacturer goes into any motorsport. Ultimately, they're not there for the good of their health. They're there for marketing reasons. They want to try and put some reflected glory onto their road cars. If you're talking about someone who makes a lot of road cars, like Porsche, Ferrari are not in Formula One just because they like going around the world driving around in circles, because it all works for Ferrari as an entity. I mean, they're a little bit different because they've been in motorsport for so long and been in Formula One for so long.
It is a different brand.
It's not necessarily the best example, but...
It's more than cars, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whenever they have that little stampy foot thing where they go, we're probably going to leave Formula One because we don't like how it's going, and you go, no, you're not. Because you milk it too much for your road cars, and the reflected glory on your road cars, even when the team is not doing amazingly well, is too important to them. And the same is true of Porsche being in the World Endurance Championship, is because at that point, running a hybrid car, they're starting to make a lot of hybrid road cars, and it just sort of looks good on them to be on that. Now this Mission E is coming along, this road car, electric road car.
It'll say Mission E on the car, won't it?
It's very important for them to be in electric racing.
Have you noticed
it's why Jaguar in there, because they've got an electric car coming this year. It's why BMW are in there, because they're already doing electric cars. Audi, all of it is all marketing.
Of course, absolutely right about that. That's the forward-looking aspect of this. That we're going to do this, we're going to spend this money so that we can sell these cars in the future. There's also the aspect, I think, that the VAG group needs to improve its image a bit after the diesel scandal, and this is part of the fallout from that.
They're distancing themselves.
And Porsche has come back into endurance racing. They've done 4 years, they've won Le Mans 3 times, and they've made their point.
Yeah.
They've made their point that they're still the boss. So, in a way, they can step back and say, job done, and move on to something else. But it does leave the fans, and it leaves Toyota, and it leaves the WEC in quite a pickle. It's a terrible shame for Toyota that the last couple of years, their duel with Porsche has been fabulous to watch. You know, it's been heartbreaking to see what's happened to Toyota on track, but they've built a great car, they've put a great team together, and they've raced beautifully, and they all but won last year, and it was only a cruel twist of fate that robbed them. Again this year, you know, it was a great battle. There was a lot of fragility to share out between all the LMP runners, really. But Toyota deserves some good opposition next year. It would be a terrible shame if they won against zero opposition.
Should we put a team together, boys? Do you think we can cobble an LMP1 together?
I mean, it can't be that difficult, can it? I don't.
But
this is the thing. I know what you mean. This, from a fan's point of view, it's an emotional argument, but my point about the marketing side of it for car companies is that it isn't emotional. No. There's no...
It's cold, hard money, yeah.
I'm sure there's a tiny little feeling of, well, in the final reckoning, should we, shouldn't we? right, we've got the money in place, it's been signed off. There is that kind of, let's go racing because the kind of cool thing that you want to do. There is always going to be some emotional component to it, but it's very far down beneath, is there going to be enough of a return on this? I mean, it's always something that fascinates me about motorsport. If not McLaren, bad example, if Ferrari win a Formula 1 race, do they sell any more 488s the next week? I don't think so, but probably the overall sort of warm glow of success and motorsport pedigree around them is probably quite hard to quantify, and yet somehow
it is definitely part of their appeal, it's part of their brand. It is.
It's the same thing. McLaren as a road car company wouldn't work if they weren't already a well-known race team.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
No matter how successful or not they are now, there is all that history they can draw on, and they do.
Well, they're going to have to rewrite their own history now. Many of them, Porsche, are doing that by going into Formula E. It's what's happening in motorsport is reflecting what's happening in the wider motoring world, where we're now looking at policies which will remove internal combustion engine cars from a number of European countries, and I include Britain as a European country, even if we're not in the EU, before 2050. Norway are talking about doing it, is it 2020 or 2025?
If we should clarify, you say remove from the road.
No longer sell
new vehicles.
Yeah, correct. Thank you, nice and accurate as ever. This is happening in motorsport, but the car manufacturers are now having to invest in marketing those technologies because they're looking at their long-term strategies. You have an immediate, a medium and a long-term strategy. It's part of that. Formula E is part of that.
Sure. In talking about this evolution of the car industry as a whole and how that relates to motorsport, I think it's interesting to think about the fact that actually there's more than one revolution taking place in the auto industry at the moment. We have the transition from essentially the internal combustion engine to electric power, which is a big deal, and it's happening, and there's no way that's not happening. But we've also got the move from individual human drivers behind the wheel to autonomous cars, self-driving vehicles, and the move from us all owning our own car to increasingly shared models of ownership.
A transport solution.
Well, you see, in that respect, motorsport is way ahead of us, because I know for a fact that Lewis Hamilton does not own his Formula 1 car. He just borrows it every other weekend.
There you go. Well, it seems to me that so much of what we love about motorsport is kind of embedded in personal ownership and in individual skill, and these are things that aren't part of the future of cars. They're not part of the future of road cars. And that is surely going to have some impact on motorsport in some way I just can't imagine. But
can we imagine that for a moment? We're kind of there with Formula E, where they've got to swap cars in the middle of the race.
That's the thing. When all of the big hitters really arrive, that will have gone away, won't it? That's the next target. Sort of major change in that sport is that there won't be that inelegant car change thing, which is a bit cock-assed.
It is a bit, yeah.
And when they get rid of that, and when you get this sort of major money coming in, which I suppose Audi and Jaguar are sort of warming everyone up for, and Renault are there as well, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, it could be Nissan. They might be rebranding that as Nissan in the next couple of seasons, I believe.
Yeah, which would make sense. Again, it comes back to marketing. There's a new Nissan Leaf coming out this year.
Yeah.
And Nissan are going to do another big push to make sure that remains. I think it's the world's best-selling electric car, and they want to make sure people associate them as being in the vanguard of accessible electric cars that people can actually buy. Forget Tesla. Tesla is still sort of quite a niche thing, and I don't think the Model 3 is going to change that anytime soon. And meanwhile, Nissan are churning out this 5-door hatchback that you can buy or lease for a relatively low price. And Nissan being in Formula E would be all part of that big push. Look, it's not just a normal-looking 5-door hatchback. It's motorsport honed.
Imagine if Le Mans had a category for pure electric cars. They could do what they do at Formula E. They could have 3 cars. They'd have a 3-car team.
They need more than that, wouldn't they? How long would it take to charge them, though? If they've got a fast charger, they probably could get away with 3.
Yeah.
But what if they weren't allowed to recharge? They'd have to have 10 or something.
Yeah.
They'll do the Panos thing. They'll have the Panos swappable battery pack. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Or run a hydrogen car if you can get the top speed out.
Just inductive charging
in the pit lane.
Or on the Mulsanne Straight. The Mulsanne Straight becomes your charging straight.
Nice. It wouldn't be really exciting.
See,
slow down.
But what about this though? There's a parallel lane down the Mulsanne Straight, and the thing is, I don't know whether inductive charging doesn't work if you're going too fast. I'm not sure about this.
Just need them closer together.
Well, okay.
the coils.
Hang on. Okay, well,
We're going to get in deeper.
Well, I was going to say, it doesn't work if you're going too fast relative to what? When you're writing down any equations that have to do with electromagnetism.
Which I do all the time, but I just haven't.
It doesn't have to be induction charging. You could just put a couple of brushes down like a scale electric car and charge up.
Yeah,
but
but
my point is that sometimes you're coming around and you're behind a rival and you think that they're going to go for an overtaking manoeuvre on the Mulsanne straight, but then they realise they're running low on battery. They've got to pull into so it's like a bus lane alongside and just ease off to get some juice in. And that puts a whole different strategic
Le Mans with a capital E. Le Mans. Yeah.
If you notice the way that a lot of these electric cars that are coming, there's a Jaguar I-Pace, there's the Audi e-tron, BMW i3, i8 already here. There's the
i5
apparently, there's a rumour they're not bringing the i5 out. They're not rushing it through. Like it's sort of I don't know why. I think because they basically the i3 and the i8 haven't sold as well as they hoped, and they need to get some money back. But all of these electric cars are defined, as a lot of tech is, by a lowercase letter at the start.
Yes.
And we will look back on this and go,
why did we ever do that?
Why are we doing that?
It's like that trend just after the millennium. All these companies were rebranded with names like Confimatod.
Lytosian. What's that? It's not a word because
it's got a cod Latin words that mean nothing at all.
Twingo.
Yeah. Or the fact that in the 80s everything was turbo.
You beat me to it. I was just about to say that.
Who made your sunglasses? Oh, turbo. Yeah. What aftershave is that? Turbo for men.
Hey, I'm sure we'll return to the 80s in the future of Gareth Jones on Speed, but as we're now into the summer holidays, I think I should tell you that the next episode will be our annual summer music compilation, and this year we've picked a theme entirely appropriate for a soggy summer. He was Zog.
Goodbye.
He was Richard.
Goodbye.
I was Gareth. See ya.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site, follow us on Twitter, or to find out about sponsorship opportunities, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.
Gareth Jones on Speed!